We are approaching Team of the Season, but also we're progressing towards the end of the game cycle of FIFA 22. And as you guys would know, I've done plenty of defending and attacking tutorials on the channel throughout the year. But as we've gone along, the game has changed. Patches have come out and new things have worked. Which brings me to deliver for you guys, and it is inspired by other YouTubers such as, let's say, Boras in previous years, a complete end-game meta tutorial for FIFA 22. Now, I don't usually ask for likes, lads, but if you do want a complete end-game defending tutorial, smash the like button, lads. Let's try and smash 300 likes on this video. If we can do so, within, let's say, the first week of this video being up, I'll drop a complete defending endgame tutorial. Now, I haven't recorded it, lads, so it will depend on whether you guys actually like this style of video. If you don't, I'll know, because the lights won't be there. So smash the like button. Let's get into it.
Griezmann, 3 men around him, and somehow finds some space. Ronaldo, fantastic opening, the drive back.
He's made himself the tiniest bit of space.
Almost feels like a bit of a taunt. Didn't really go for him. Oh! The display there is absolutely ridiculous. The Elastico on the goal line. On the goal line, the finest.
We
of
talked about
margins.
Aussie Super. He's not here to make up the numbers.
Boy, oh boy, there's a lot to get through, but first of all, I'm going to delve into passing because it's the simplest one that I want to break down for you guys. Basically, in my opinion, the actual meta for passing this year is regular passes. I've broken this down for you in previous tutorials, lads, and it still remains the same even towards the end of this game cycle. I have stood by this and said to you guys, especially post-patch, especially after the first 2 or 3 patches where they removed driven passes, that we should not do driven passes, we should not do through balls, and we should only stick to regular AETS passes. The reason for this is because you don't need any other passing method. I find regular AETS passes from the start to now have worked tremendously. They lock onto the player, even if they're quite far away, it will still have enough power to reach that player without doing a driven pass. Whether I'm passing from out of the back, whether I'm passing in the midfield, on the wing, even inside the box, I'm always using regular AETS passes. The reason why driven passes and through balls do not work is they actually are quite the same. They're quite similar in terms of the mechanics of the ball trajectory. What happens is it goes closer to the defender than it does to your attacker. And obviously, pre-patch, at the start of the game, driven passes wasn't the case for that. They would basically go and lock onto your attacker very quickly, and you would be able to counter-attack your opponent quite quickly. However, towards the end of this game, especially post-patch, they are the same as through balls now. Through balls have always been very bad in FIFA 22, and they are similar to driven passes. They go closer to the defender than they do to the attacker. So we need to avoid them, lads. Meta for you guys in terms of passing towards the end of this game iteration is regular AETS passes. Now, I did say no to through balls, but one exception for me in particular is the double tap through ball, the lifted double tap through ball. Now, this has been overpowered and has been classified as the meta throughout the iteration of this game. And basically, when you are progressing up the pitch, you see a runner and there is an opportunity to do an over-the-top through ball. If you double tap the through ball button, which is obviously triangle on PS5 or it is Y on Xbox, and you hold the L1 button, what happens is it does a through ball in the air, which is relatively overpowered. What I mean by that is it actually locks onto your attacker more often than not. It has a very, very, let's say, meta trajectory, so it always floats nicely into the path of your attacker. It's not a 50-50 pass where you're like, well, it's going to work now sometimes, but then it mightn't work others. No, what it actually does is it falls nicely into the path of your attacker the majority of the time, and I utilize this through ball a lot of the time, especially in my attack, and I see there is an opportunity to do an over-the-top through ball. Now, there is also another variation of this through ball, and that is actually the driven lobbed double tap through ball. I've done a tutorial on this, and it is quite meta even now end game. What it is a more direct driven version of that over the top through ball that I just taught you, the double tap version. And basically what it does is a very low and hard version of that through ball, which still floats into the trajectory of your attacker. Now, that is where your judgment will need to come in. Should I do a driven one, or should I do a more lobbed version of the over-the-top through ball? That is for your judgment, but basically what I find is when the player is quite far away, the driven version works best. If they're quite close to the player on the ball and you're looking to do an over-the-top through ball, then the regular double tap over the top usually works well. Since we're delving off from passing, I think the closest thing to that is crossing. And in my opinion, lads, crossing should not be done as an endgame method, except for this meta version, and that is the German cross. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of this before. I've done a tutorial on this. It's very, very broken. It's overpowered. I've taught you before how to defend against it, as well as how to attack with this technique. And basically what you need to do is trigger a run from the midfield, and what that does is it mates the midfielder, or let's say your centre back, depending on who you want to trigger the run with. Take a run from the midfield or the back all the way up towards your opponent's goal, and as they are on the defensive line, on the shoulder of the defender, that is when you want to hold down the cross button for at least 2 or 3 bars of power. What it does is it always locks on to that attacker, especially if you time it right. It's a very broken technique of crossing, and that's why it's called the German cross, because they came up with this way of crossing, and it was brought out in an FGS qualifier where a pro came out on Twitter and said, now you know all about it. This is an overpowered way of crossing in FIFA 22. I've kept it secret. Now it's out for you guys. And then the FIFA community went mental with this crossing technique. Some people liked it, some people were against it, and I understand why. It's a meta, overpowered crossing technique, which is not realistic, so I do understand why. But when you're doing this crossing technique, you need to understand that when you're performing it, the angle the player who is doing the cross needs to be parallel either to the byline, which is the line where the goal sits, or the sideline where you throw it in. So he needs to be parallel either direction. If he is not, the angle of the cross will not be the correct angle. What I mean by that is you want the cross to be curved. You don't want it to be direct and like a chipped version. You want it to be curved into the actual pathway and trajectory of the attacker or the defender or the midfielder making the run from the midfield, and that is very, very important. If it's a regular cross, it doesn't lock on as well. It needs to be curved. The way you can make it curved is by facing parallel with the ball carrier to the byline or to the side. It brings me on to another form of crossing. Now, I did say you shouldn't cross, and the reason why I say you shouldn't cross is because I prefer, personally, to work the ball into the box and not have a 50-50 header with the opponent, and that is usually the case when you cross the ball. You're going in for a 50-50 header, which is not in your favor, if you know what I mean, because you need to get the right amount of power on the header. You need to aim the header correctly, and with the manual setting on headers set with the competitive master switch setting this year, unfortunately, lads, headers are harder to aim, and of course you need to win the header, which is obviously against you as well, against a big defender. However, there is a crossing angle that's similar to the German cross, which does work. It's quite meta in FIFA 22, and that is when you are obviously parallel to the byline or to the sideline, and you see a player at the back post. It does that curved version of the cross that I was just delving into before with the German cross. That angle is crucial, as I said, and it's this specific angle with the cross that is broken. It's meta. Okay, and obviously, lads, you can perform this to the player at the back post, and a lot of the time they will be able to header it in, or obviously volley that shot in. Now, what I find is, especially if they're at the back post, it's very hard to pick them off, especially if you're defending against this, because a lot of the time your opponent won't have enough skill to select a defender with the right stick and drag him back to the back post to cover that cross. And that is what I recommend you guys doing this if you're wanting to defend against it. It's very important, is you obviously do select that defender and cover that back post man, but a lot of the time we don't have enough time to do that, so that is why this crossing method is quite good. I think it's important that I delve off into skill moves, because this is actually something that's quite vital in someone's attack, especially once they've got the basics down pat. Now, I say the basics because I've said to many people, especially in my coaching academy, that I want you to get the basics down pat before implementing skill moves into your game, because passing, dribbling, shooting, getting passing angles, not sprinting. All of the basics, all of the techniques, all of the fundamentals of FIFA should be down pat before you perform skill moves. But what I want to delve into is the skill moves that are quite useful this year in FIFA 22, especially in game. And what I found is skill moves including the reverse elastico. The reason why this works is because it gets an angle a lot of the time that you can't get with any other skill move, and it flicks it to the right. And it's very good inside the box, especially because you can have a face on one-on-one with the defender. You can also be facing, let's say, parallel to the goal, and you want to create an angle for a shot. You can hit the reverse elastico, and it's enable you to get an angle for the shot or to beat the defender. Now, to perform it, it's quite difficult. It will take you time to get down pat the actual angles, but lads, once you practice it, it should become second nature. To perform it, you need to enter in with the right stick at a 9 o'clock angle to where the player is facing. So that is to the left of where the player is facing. You need to rotate it all the way around to the back of where the player is facing. Okay, so that would be 6 o'clock. And the player will flick it. It's a reverse flip flap. They will flick it to the right. All the time. It's quite hard to tackle, it's quite hard to read, and it gets that angle that you are after, especially when you're trying to beat that defender or get the shot off. Another skill move which I highly recommend, lads, is of course the elastico itself, the regular one. Now, I have found this year, especially if you're running and you're performing this skill move, or you're jogging or you're dribbling, it's not as good, it's not as effective. Okay, so that's why I like to perform the elastico while standing still. You can do that by doing a fake shot stop, an L1 stop, whatever it is, because it's quite nifty, it's quite effective, it's quite hard to tackle and read when you're standing still, and it's very quick compared to when you're dribbling. Now, to perform it, it's the reversed version of the reverse elastico. So it's entering in at the right angle of where the player is facing and then rotating that around clockwise to the back of the player, which is 6 o'clock. So it's from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and the player does a flip flap from right to left. They flick it to the left, and then of course you can get the angle for the shot, or of course, as I was saying, you can get it to beat that defender. But as I was saying, it's very effective pretty much when you are standing still. The ball roll, and I'm really going to keep it to these 3 skill moves, and the reason being is because you can use others. They are effective. I have iterated this in other skill move tutorials on my skill move tutorial series, as you guys would know, but I will keep it to this skill move, and that is the ball roll. The ball roll for me is one of the best skill moves in FIFA 22 because it is simple, it allows you to keep possession, you can get angles to take the ball away from the defender, you can get angles to create a shooting opportunity, you can round the keeper with this technique, any of these above, okay? And that is why I love the ball roll. To perform it, you enter in with the right stick either to 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock to where the player is facing. So it's either right or to the left, and you hold that for a split second. The player does a ball roll left or right, and of course, lads, you can use it to take it away from the defenders, get shooting opportunities, create angles, keep possession, round the keeper, all of the above. And that's for me why the reverse elastico, the elastico, and the ball rolls are in fact my best skill moves, in my opinion, at the end of this game. Now, I do want to add something in quickly in terms of skill moves and actually standing still. Now, I'm going to add this into this video because what I found is certain skill moves are actually more overpowered when you're standing still, including the elastico, as I iterated just before. And ways of doing this is L1 stop, you can do a fake shot stop, you could do a fake Rabona, whatever it is. And basically, after you're standing still for a split second and the defender approaches you, you can hit him with another skill move. It might be the, let's say, elastico. It might be the reverse elastico. It might be the La Croqueta. It might be the scoop turn. But what I have found is skill moves, when performed while standing still, some are quite overpowered, some are quite effective, and some are better when standing still compared to when you are dribbling. So that is why I added in this segment. Delving off from skill moves, I think I have to delve into dribbling, lads. I'm trying to keep it in a nice flowing state, this video, to basically interchange these different meta tactics, techniques, mechanics, shooting, dribbling, passing, whatever it is. And I think dribbling stems off from skill moves, lads. In my opinion, lads, dribbling this year is very, very crucial. I utilize it in my attacking game quite often in terms of trying to beat opponents with it. I use it to create space. I use it to get passing angles. I use it to get shooting angles, whatever it is. I'm using left stick dribbling. And a lot of people really do like the way I dribble, and they see me on Twitch live and they go, how did you do that? I can't do that. And they think I'm using agile dribbling or strap dribbling. No, I'm using just regular left stick dribbling, and I'm not going to add in agile or strap dribbling into this video except for one specific technique of dribbling that is quite meta, which I'll delve off into the next segment. However, what I have found with dribbling is you need to use it to feint defenders, you need to use it to create space, get shooting angles, passing angles, whatever it is. And the way you do that is by chopping the left stick. Now what I have found is, especially in FIFA 22, when you chop the stick, the player will be quite responsive to it. Now, I have noticed you can roll it, and especially there was a patch that came out, I think it was like patch number 3, where EA actually made it more responsive to dribble when you roll the stick, okay? And by rolling, I mean you're actually moving it around to dribble with. When the game came out originally, FIFA 22, you could chop it and that would be very agile, and that would be the way of dribbling. And I did deconstruct this in a dribbling tutorial that I did at the start of the game. What I have found though is you need to use both, especially end game, chopping and rolling. Now in particular, I utilize left stick dribbling to get passing angles or shooting angles. Now the way you do that is by feinting the defender. It might take you rolling the stick a little bit to create an angle and get the defender side by side with you, then chopping it back and forwards. What back and forward movements do is it makes you feint the defender away. And I find that the majority of the time, the defender your opponent will read you. They'll read the feint back. So you'll be dribbling one way, you'll then dribble the opposite way. And then what they will do is they'll take the defender and turn with you. They'll turn with the dribble turn that you've done. What they don't read though is the feint. So you go directly back to the direction that you were originally facing. So you're facing one way, turning back and then going back the original way. So it's a feint, and they don't read that feint. And what that does is opens up two things. It's passing angles and shooting angles. And that is why, in my opinion, it makes this meta video, because of course, lads, it's very, very useful in FIFA 22, especially in those key areas when you're wanting to create a passing angle or you're wanting to create a shooting angle. And I utilize this in the midfield, in the bots, on the wing, whatever it is. It's very important to feint the defender, and you utilize it with a combination of chopping and rolling the sticks. Now in terms of the meta way of dribbling and actually performing the best dribbling technique for you guys and actually weaving through the space, which is what you want to do, and staying away from the defenders, one key technique I like to use, especially in this game of FIFA Endgame, is not looking at where the defenders are, but looking at the space, looking at the path. I've used the analogy before of skiing. When you're skiing, you need to focus on the path and not the trees. If you focus on the trees, you're going to hit the tree. Focus on the path, you're going to follow that path and weave through it. It's the same as dribbling in FIFA 22. Look at the space, look at the path, follow it, okay, and stay away from the defenders. Ensure that you're bearing in mind where they are, because as I said, you need to bear in mind where the defender is to feint them away sometimes. But it is important that we are mainly focusing on that path to basically dribble through the defense and create those angles for you to make the pass or get the shot. Now, one dribbling technique I wanted to add into this video was the R2/strap dribbling technique. And what this is when you are dribbling, more specifically when you are sprint dribbling, and the player takes a touch, you can tap R2 and tap L1 at the same time. What that does is it allows you to turn at a very acute angle. So wherever the left stick is pointing, he will turn very quickly to that direction. The reason why sprinting is quite negative in FIFA 22 is because of the touch they're taking, as well as because they cannot turn quick enough. But when you implement this dribbling technique into your sprinting game when you're dribbling, what happens is they turn very quickly, they can get away from an opponent and basically weave in and out of tackles whilst you're sprint dribbling. And I'd have to add this into the endgame meta video lab because it is just so unpredictable and people don't expect you to do it when you are left stick dribbling. But one technique I like to use is just utilizing the byline. Sometimes if you dribble straight and you literally walk along that byline, a lot of the time people will not expect it. They think you're going to cut back, but you don't. You don't cut back, lads. What you do is you walk along it, and a lot of the time you can get to the point where you can pass it across the goal to the player sitting in the 18-yard box, ready to receive the ball and tap it into the goal. I also utilize this technique especially when I'm on the wing, and sometimes there will be an opportunity where I feint the defender with the left stick dribbling technique that I've taught you just previously, and basically then burst off up the line with the R2 button away from the defender. And because you're going up the line, and people don't really do this, it's quite unpredictable. So lads, at the end of the day, we can utilize this, and that is because they think you're going to go back around, they think you're going to pass backwards, but you don't. You continue going forwards up the line and progress up the pitch. Just quickly, before moving on to finishing in FIFA 22 as the meta end game, is the actual explosive sprint technique. And the reason why I like using this, not always, but sometimes, is because you can actually burst off quite quickly with this technique. It's just R2 when you're dribbling and you want to burst off into some space quite quickly. You tap R2, and what happens is the player will accelerate quite quickly into that space. The mistake people make though is what I delved off into just previously, was they continue holding sprint and then the touch is so large that they can't have control of the ball. No, you want to utilize this proportionally, but especially it's very useful in certain situations when you want to burst into some space. This is very important, lads. You should tap R2, especially when trying to burst past the opponent, but don't abuse it, as I outlined before. Of course, finishing, lads. A lot of people have trouble with this, some people don't have trouble with this, and that is dependent on whether they have opened themselves up to different finishing techniques, or in general whether they have learnt the angles that work in the game. Now, I have delved into this in a previous video. I did a complete finishing tutorial post-patch, and what I have found is, lads, when you are finishing, pretty much if you get the correct angles in the correct spots, in the sweet spots of the game, you will finish your chance and you will score. Near post finishes, now there's an actual sweet spot for this. Delved off into this in the previous tutorial. It's basically halfway between the dot shot and the edge of the 18-yard box, and then halfway between the edge of the 18-yard box at the back and the byline. So it's in that central area, and it's either side in the 18-yard box. And if you're in this sweet spot, what I find is if you hit 2 or 3 bars of power to the near post, the keeper will not save it. It will go into the top corner, especially if you have a relatively high finishing attacker, okay? And I find, lads, it's a very effective way of scoring at the near post. Far post finishes, of course, lads, they do work, and I recommend utilizing far post as much as you can in FIFA 22, especially if the angle presents itself. Outside of the box shots. Now, there's 2 sweet spots for this. It's the finesse shot around the edge of the 18-yard box to the side, to the corner, and it is the power shot in front of the 18-yard box around where the half circle is. What I recommend is performing this around where the corner is of the 18-yard box on the outside. Okay, you need that angle. Otherwise, if it's too narrow and you're too close to the byline, or you're too far out from the 18-yard box, it won't be the correct angle for this. It will either go wide, the keeper will save it, or hit the bar. What I find though is if you hit this sweet spot, if you go in the sweet spot of the pitch and you finesse with around 2 or 3 bars of power, bat post, what happens is it will curl into the top corner. Now, you need that angle that's similar to the cross that I taught you before. You need to be parallel to the 18-yard box, parallel to the byline. Okay, so you need to be facing sideways to that. And if you can ring the shot, you have a higher chance of it going in. Another technique, of course, as I was saying, is outside the 18-yard box, around that half circle. Okay, if you're on the edge of the 18-yard box and you're around where the circle meets, the half circle meets each side of the 18-yard box, around that area, you can shoot far post, around 2 or 3 bars of power. I find a lot of the time it does fly into the back of the net. Of course, it wouldn't be a finishing tutorial without me explaining to you guys the 100% finishing chance. What I mean by this is a chance where you take a shot and you know yourself you're gonna get the goal. How do we do this? By rounding the keeper or finding the extra pass. Now, ways of rounding the keeper, I've delved off into this in a previous tutorial. Of course, lads, you can do it through a ball roll, you can do it by doing a fade shot, whatever really skill move you want. Even left stick dribbling to get around the keeper and basically tap it into that net. This will give yourself the 100% chance, and of course will increase your chances by literally like 90 to 100% of scoring that goal. Another technique, of course, as I was saying, was finding the extra pass. This is the technique I like to use more often, and that is when I'm playing the ball around the 18-yard box and I want to find a pass into a player who is more open, who is free in the box to tap it in. And a lot of the time, lads, I get this opportunity from passing around using regular AX passes and finding that free player in the box, and incorporates using techniques such as dribbling to make the player feint to a side and basically opening up the passing lane. It incorporates dribbling to the space, it incorporates regular passes, it incorporates also an attacking technique which I'm about to break down for you, and that is taking the ball from the wing into the center to where the space opens up and basically having that player shoot home that goal. Taking the ball from the wing and basically drawing the defenders over towards that side to open up space in the middle, lads. This is an attacking technique that I use quite often in FIFA 22, especially with formations which are wide in nature, the 4-2-3-1, the 4-2-2-2, the 4-4-2, whatever it is, you can utilize this. And the reason why it works is because if you keep the ball with your wing back or your winger, what happens is, it's the same as real football, the defense slides to that side and then there's space in the middle, lads. So you can exploit that space by quickly passing inside to available players and continuing to do so until you find a player who is open and ready to take a shot. Now what you need to realize is you can't just continue to pass inside. You need to work the angles, and the way you work the angles is either from passing around the wing area or dribbling, lads, to make a defender go to one side to open up space and a passing lane on the opposite side to get it into the center, lads. And people just think, oh yeah, I can take it to the wing and then pass it inside willy-nilly. No, obviously, the defenders are going to try and defend this. So it's important that we get the angles for it. You're passing around the wingers and then trying to find a central pass into an attacker showing for the ball. This brings me into my next segment of the ball line. Now, I haven't actually done an individual tutorial on this, lads, and I don't think anyone knows about this, or very limited people know about this, because people just don't think that the angle of this pass works, but it does. And especially when you're utilizing the technique of taking the ball from the wing into the center, you can use this pass. Now, what I find is if you have the ball with your wing back or your winger and you are dribbling around that byline area near the corner flag and you are looking at the runners inside, so whether it's the striker, the cam, whoever it is, and they're running towards the byline, if you time it right and if you press the pass button, regular AX pass, and it goes into what I was saying before, you only need regular passes in this game. You don't need anything else, and I've stressed this so many times. But basically, if the player is running towards the byline and he's on the shoulder of that defender, you time it right and get the angle for the pass right and you shimmy the defender away to open up that passing lane, what you can do is pass along the line and it locks on to that attacker making that run on the line, lads. And what you can do from there is look to try and sweat it across to a player showing for the ball. I will have an individual tutorial on this coming out soon, but super overpowered way of attacking, lads. You should definitely use it. It also brings me off into the chip shot sweet spot. We know, lads, that chips do work in a certain angle, and that is when you're around the same area of the pitch as the actual near post sweet spot, which is halfway between obviously the dot shot, the edge of the 18-yard box, and the byline and the edge of the 18-yard box. So it's in that central area on the right or left of the 18-yard box. And you chip it far post. If you hit around 2 or 3 bars of power, the keeper just dives down. It's really, really weird, lads, and I'm not sure why the mechanics are like that, but it is quite an effective way of finishing, okay? Especially in those situations you have no pressure on you and the keeper is there. You look like you can hit that chip shot. Do it, lads, because it's quite a meta way of finishing in FIFA 22. The driven switch, actually a very, very broken way of switching the ball, lads, and honestly, not many people know about it, alright? If you hold R1 and L1 and you press the square button on PS5 or it's X on Xbox and you aim the left stick all the way over to your wing back or your winger, what it does is it locks on and you hold around 2 or 3 bars, well, around 3 or 4 bars of power you need to hold down for, and the ball drives, okay, from the wing back or the winger all the way over to the opposite side, and it always seems to lock on. And sometimes It even acts as a through ball. I know, it actually goes in front of the attacker and they run onto it and they get in behind. It's super broken, lads. Not many people know about it. And if you're looking for a quick way to get the ball on the opposite side, use this technique. Now it brings us off into custom tactics and into formations, lads. Now I'm not going to do a huge segment on this because I've already done an in-depth guide to my custom tactics and player instructions in FIFA 22 around a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to see that video, go and check it out. However, this segment will just basically delve into some formations that I like to use personally towards the end of the game and what I have found have worked for me. Now I have always said though, you should try out what works for you. Play around with the tactics and see what works for you, lads. Don't always rely on someone else. However, what I've been using is the 4-2-2, and that is pretty much the only formation I've been using. Yes, I do have other ones in my settings. However, the reason why I use the 4-2-2 is because I like to use that attacking technique of taking the ball from the wing and into the centre. What happens when I do that with a 4-2-2? If you have the ball on the wing with your right cam or your left cam, and you are looking to look for some passes in to the center, because there are also 3 other attackers lined up, so it's your 2 strikers and the opposite lamb or ram, what happens is those passing options become available because you can find a pass into the striker, you can then find another pass into the other striker, and then eventually the left or the right cam will be available open in the box. Because the defense is slid, you then have an attacker opposite the pitch, opposite the side you're attacking on, open to then have a shot on goal. Now the tactics for this, I like to keep it simple, lads. I do have fast build up on my actual attacking speed up build up play, but I have balanced on my attacking runs, and then also in terms of defense it's on balanced. Width though, I would like to have it on around 40 to 45. Reason being is the recent patch, obviously, lads, has basically EA have opened up more space in the defense with the recent patch. So at the end of the day, it's easy to exploit the center of the pitch if you don't have compressed formation. So I have it around 40 to 45 width. Then for the depth, I like to put pressure onto my opponent, lads. So of course I have it on around 7 or so bars, so I can be a bit higher up and essentially put pressure onto the opponent. Moving into some bonus segments, I do want to delve into player lock, lads. It's super effective, super overpowered, super meta, can be used end game, lads, and specifically when you're in the bots. The reason why this is useful is because you can take a player who is maybe offside or being marked, you can then drag him into a space in the bots to pass it to him and then have a tap-in opportunity. To do a player lock, you need to press down on the right stick and the left stick at the same time, flick the right stick to the player that you want to control, and then what will happen is the player on the ball will be controlled by the AI and you will have control of the player that you wanted to select in the bots. You can then run him into a position, then press pass. What happens is the AI controlled player with the ball passes the ball into that player you have selected, and then you can shoot it home. There you have it, lads. It's a complete guide to attacking endgame, aka meta attacking guide for FIFA 22 for the end of the iteration of this year's FIFA, lads. I could say I have enjoyed FIFA 22. There hasn't been, honestly, anything that's been super overpowered. There has been a few things, but I actually like how it's been a little bit balanced. I know some people be in the comment section, I know, lads, whatever, I can have my opinion, but honestly, I've enjoyed FIFA 22. I'm doing quite well in the game. I've qualified for events. Obviously, we've got the E-League coming up in a week or two, so stay tuned for that as well. If you did enjoy this video, smash the like button, lads, and of course, I'm doing tutorials on Instagram and TikTok. I'm also coaching one-on-one on patreon.com, so links are in the description to those. But as always, I hope you have a good day. I'm out. Sayonara, au revoir, adios, salam, ciao. Goodbye.